I'm Sheila Richmond, and we're here at the Natchitoches-NSU Folk Festival. In fact, it's the 39th annual Natchitoches-NSU Folk Festival. It's July 21st, and we're here with Robert D. Bennett. And you're a fairly prolific author in the area, and I was wondering if you could just give us a little background, who you are, where
Sure.
you come from, that kind of thing.
Well, I'm originally from Natchitoches. I lived between here and Houston all my life. I was actually born in Alexandria, but my family was living in Natchitoches at the time. I've done some genealogy work, and so I know that on my father's side, St. Denis was my 7th great-grandfather, so that side's been here since there was a Natchitoches.
Right.
On the other side, my mom's side, I think they first started coming here in early 1700s, settling out in the southern part of the county over toward the Kisatchie National Forest.
And what name would that be? Something we'd recognize?
There were Alfords, Owens, Boltons,
okay.
Just tons. Seems like out there you're related to everybody. So I went to school. I started school at Provençal. It was called Provençal High School. And the school had 300 students from kindergarten through graduation. I love the school. I stayed in touch with, my first grade teacher. I stayed in touch with her. She passed away. My very first book, The Bottle Tree, is even dedicated to her. Miss McKillis. After she became if she left teaching, she went on the school board. And
here we go, a copy of The Bottle Tree. This is dedicated to her?
It's dedicated to her and to my Aunt Thelma Leach, who was also a teacher out in that area. She taught at Provençal and Kisatchie School and a couple of others. She actually went to Northwestern back when it was Louisiana Normal School. And got her degree here, then taught all her life. Then after I actually graduated high school in Houston, I said living back and forth between here and there. I got married 2 years after I graduated to a girl I dated in high school, and we promptly moved back to Natchitoches since we could get our stuff packed up. And we lived here for, about 7 years. Well, we left in 89, and I went to law school over in Texas at Baylor Law School. After I'd finished, Baylor will accept you after 3 years of undergraduate work. And so I had actually been in Northwestern for 2 years, but I'd taken so many hours that I had 3 years worth of hours.
Oh, okay.
And so they admitted me into law school there. When I graduated, I moved to a little town called Gilmer that is in northeast Texas. It's as close to Louisiana as you can get without being in Louisiana.
Okay.
And but this is my home. I always consider it my home. No matter where I'll ever live, Natchitoches will always be my home. I started writing when I was in junior high school, just little stories and stuff, and some of them I still have laying around. They weren't very good. And when I was a lawyer, I wrote one book that was awful, and it's still sitting in a drawer somewhere. I'm never going to do anything with it. But then I kind of got serious about it, and I wrote, the first book I wrote was Junebug in the Body.
Okay.
The first book I published was The Bottle Tree. And
so this is Junebug in the Body.
That's Junebug in the Body.
This is the first book you
I actually finished.
Right. But this is the first one.
That's the first one I published. We were waiting for I actually sent Junebug in the Body to a publisher, a couple publishers through an agent, and they liked the book. They were interested. They wanted me to rework it to bring it from its setting into a modern day setting. And I said, well, I can write you another book that does that, but this book is set then for a reason, and I'm not going to change it. So, and then I found out it's just easier to do it yourself. I can write my books. My wife edits them, or we hire an editor, and then we can put it online. We can publish them, and then we go to various shows and stuff and sell them online. And the average in the United States, the average book sells 500 copies from any publisher. Well, I sell that many myself, and I get to keep all the money, so it's even better. And I decide what goes in my book.
Okay.
I became interested in the topics here. I've been interested in them all my life. I learned how to read by my Uncle Mike's here today, and he's a big reader. And my grandmother had me reading before I was in kindergarten, and I've always read a lot higher grade level than what my class was. and I love the library. And almost every one of my books, there's something about a library in there. So I found that the more you read, the better you write. And if you ever stop reading, your writing suffers immediately. So anytime I finish a book, I take a little break before I go into the next one, and read a few books and relax, and then start right back up. I've written, I think, 8 books that are novels, and I've ghostwritten, I think it's 7 or 8 legal books under another name for a company.
Okay.
Those are a little more, they're not any more difficult, they're just a lot more boring to write.
Oh, okay.
So, and that's kind of who I am. I still stay involved in, I love folk history. I love talking to people about how things used to be and what's going on. I got into genealogy a few years ago and found out that leads to some great stories. Find out a lot about your family, and then when you're interviewing your family, you find out a lot of things you didn't know about them.
Right.
So,
right. And the community. And the community.
Absolutely.
You'll find out more about a community
too. A little town called Bellwood that's out south of Provençal on the way to Leesville was once fairly thriving little community, and now it's a crossroad, and there's a church on one side, a church jumped into the other road, and some houses but no stores or anything. But it used to be fairly busy down there. The Bottle Tree is about a turpentine camp that my grandfather and my great aunt were at when they were kids.
Oh, okay.
And it's actually a real place. It's to the right of the road between Bellwood and Leesville. My uncle and I found it one time. We were out going through the woods, and there's this what looked like a big rock sitting out in the middle of the woods, or in the middle of the creek, and we hit it with something, and it smelled like pine saw.
Oh, wow.
It was just amazing how it smelled. So we got down scratching with our knives and found out it was a pile of shavings or sawdust.
Ooh.
And okay, well, what's that? Then we got to looking around up under these trees. There were these little metal trays all rusted out, and trees all around there. And ended up talking to my great aunt, asked her what she thought it was. She said, well, we lived there when we were little kids. I was just a little bitty girl. And her father worked there in the camp, and mother kept house there. They would build these turpentine camps. They'd live there, and then when all the trees were worked out, they would move somewhere else. Just tear down the town, pick it up, and move somewhere else, build the town again. There are a lot of people doing it, and I just found it really fascinating.
Right.
And then I read up on it and found out that they were doing it all across the South. And if you go out in the woods today, you can still find relics of them. I think about 4 years ago, a guy came by and showed me a ceramic pot he had found from that same camp. It was buried under pine leaves and stuff.
Right.
But
for catching the
turpentine. They'd cut a ring around the pine tree and pull the bark off in that ring, and one side of the ring they cut a little notch. They put that container up under it. All the pine sap would drop down in there, and they'd carry it over, and they'd boil it up and distill it.
Right.
So that's kind of how I got into this. And a bottle tree, on my way out to my great-grandmother's house, one of our relatives on the right of the road had this tree out in his front yard. He had a bottle tree. He had bottles hanging all over it. One of the Gandys. And I don't remember what kind of bottles he had. I remember there were some plastic ones on there. I remember there were a bunch of glass ones too.
Right. Usually glass.
Yes, usually glass. And I always wondered what it's for. I just never asked anybody. And I thought then, well, I guess that's a neat name for a book. And when I got ready to write a book about the camp, I thought that would be a good name. Now, how can I fit that into the book? And I managed to fit it in. So. Yeah.
So this is going to be about, this one is about the turpentine.
It is. It's about 2 little kids and 3 little kids. That 2 of them live in the turpentine camp. One of them, whose dad works there, it's got a little bit of civil rights issues in it. The little boy in there, the African American boy, is named after a really good friend of mine I went to school at Provençal with. And it's just, that's still my favorite book I've written.
Oh, good. So this really is family and stories and heritage is the best place to start
Absolutely.
to write stories. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
If you have an older relative, if you're interested in, let's say you're interested in wars, okay? If you talk to an older relative, if they weren't in a war, they could probably point you to somebody who was that they know. And then you go talk to them, you ask a few questions and let them talk. I had one great uncle who was in the Flying Tigers, and I didn't know that until not too long ago.
Why do they keep things like that hidden?
I had
That's
another
a marvelous experience.
another great uncle that he had some problems with alcohol, but he was I always wondered why. Really nice fellow, but he used to drive those landing craft in the Pacific that would leave the ship and go in and dump the soldiers out on the beaches. And what they basically acted like was, they'd drop the thing and they'd start firing into the landing craft, and he'd see all these soldiers dropping in front of him. And I found out later that from one of his brothers that he said he'd probably seen hundreds, if not thousands, of people die within 10 feet of him. And it had an effect on him.
Yeah, and at that time, they didn't have any kind of services for people. PTSD?
That's right.
Yeah.
And I didn't find out about his experience. I knew he was a cook at Fort Polk. I thought he'd been a cook in the Navy because he had talked about it several times about the food there, but he never mentioned that. And apparently nobody really talked to him. He told his brother about it one time, and then that's about it. And so I'm in the process now trying to gather his records and the one that was in the Flying Tigers, get their military records and look through them and see what the records tell me.
Right. And then a story's going to come from that.
It could.
It could.
It could.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a blurb. I'll hear somebody say something. Up here, I'll wander around the booths and talk to people. Northwestern has a great library, and up on the top floor they have what used to be called the Louisiana Room.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's still called
Kennedy
that.
Henry Research Center.
Okay. I spent a summer between jobs, and I treasure hunted. That's actually how we found the turpentine camp. And I went up to that room. I was just digging through the records. That they have some phenomenal old Louisiana records there. They've got original writings from Cammie G. Henry and the people that stayed at her place, at the artist colony out there. They've got photographs there that are just phenomenal. I read a letter from a gentleman who lived down at Cane Creek, close to Monette's Ferry, and he was talking about watching the cavalry charge back and forth across the fields with cannonballs landing in the middle of his plowed fields during the Civil War. And
Wow.
it's still the handwritten letter's still up there somewhere. So it's just amazing what's in there if you dig and look a little bit. And if I go to like a flea market or old bookstore, I'm always picking through there, just looking for that next little thing.
Yeah, yeah. And then you can gather a whole bunch of little things, and then all of a sudden, your story's there.
It's there.
Yeah.
I probably got 200 different research books at home on all kinds of things. And one of these days, an idea for a story will hit me, and I'll just grab it. And while most of my books are fiction, there's a little bit of truth buried in each one.
Right.
I try to. People may be fictional, and what happens to them fictional, but generally the land's accurate. Generally, the way the business works is accurate. I don't have somebody in 1932 driving a 57 Chevy. I'm pretty particular about things.
Yeah. And you do background research to make sure you're historically accurate about certain things. Yeah.
I'm writing a book right now on Doc Holliday. It's a weird western where Doc Holliday's a vampire.
Okay.
And
Okay.
you would think that with that you can just go wild, but I've got 6 books on Doc Holliday, and
Right.
when I get finished with it, if you look up a chapter in my book on that day where it says he will have been there. And there'll be some record of it somewhere. So, and that's just a little, people told me that you don't really have to do that. Well, I do. 'Cause
Yeah.
it'll bother me and bother me and bother me if it's not accurate.
Is that the attorney in you, do you think?
Could be.
That you have to make sure things are accurate and factual and...
It could be.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way, but if you can write it, if you take 5 minutes and research, I don't mind researching anyway, and get it right, or just don't take the 5 minutes and mess it up. It's just 5 minutes.
Right.
So, and somebody will notice when you get something wrong every time.
People are quick to point it out. Right. Right.
Yeah, I get emails from people who read my books, and they'll mention that this isn't right, and usually they're misunderstanding where it was at, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, you have to take liberties with what is actually in that
Sure.
landscape, kind of thing. And yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't have Doc Holliday be a vampire and have it entirely accurate.
And you couldn't have him in New York.
Right.
Because that's not where he was.
That's right.
Right.
So if you like research, it's really easy to write. If you like to read, it's really easy to write. If you don't like to read, you won't like to write. So.
Well, I'm curious about this one, because this has the hero, can I say the main character, the hero, Noah Chance, is about to graduate from high school, and he has Down syndrome. And that's unusual.
It is.
And what's the story behind this one?
I got the idea for that one. I wrote on that one a long time, because I got the idea one day when I was an attorney. The sister brought her younger sister in who had Down syndrome, and her name was Dawn. I'm pretty sure it was Dawn. And she was wanting to get guardianship over her. And her sister had gotten some trouble in the past, and there was a nursing home that wanted to keep guardianship over her, basically so they could keep the money coming in. It was my opinion. But Dawn was just absolute love from the time she walked in the door to the time she left. I never saw her do anything except smile. We walked to the courthouse. She wanted to hold my hand while we were walking and talk to me. And she was the most amazing person I think I met while I was a lawyer. I met a lot of neat people. And I realized that what I thought having a child with Down syndrome or a family with Down syndrome was nothing like it really was. And so I started doing some research, and it fell into place. The name No Chance came because the lawyer for the other side said you have no chance of winning this case. We won, by the way, but and that stuck with me. I couldn't name a kid No, so his name's Noah, and they call him No for short. And it fit in with the name of the book. Plus, it's the first in a series, and so I've got No Chance and Second Chance, and then I've got 4 or 5 others planned out with some variation on the Chance name in the title. That just worked out well.
4 or 5 others? Wow. So this is going to be a continuous one.
It is. But, a lot of my books are part of the series. The Bottle Tree's not. Junebug is. And my new one on the Dragons is a part of the series. But I like to read series. Going back to my uncle, I'd ride around with him in the truck, say we're going hunting or fishing, or when I worked for him. And he always had a book on the dashboard, and usually had one thrown up under the seat of the truck or one behind the seat of the truck. And so I'd pick them up whenever we went anywhere, and I'd read the books. And a lot of his were series. And I got to where I really liked the series because it's the same character. You pick up number 2, and you already know him from number 1 a little bit.
There you go.
And then you build on them. So you don't have to spend as much of the book getting to know him in number 2 as you did number 1. You just mention it, and then you get more time into your story. I'm doing something a little bit different with the No Chance books, in that I've only written 2 of them so far. I'm working on the 3rd one. The first one was told from his best friend, who's a high school football jock. The second book, Second Chance, is told from the perspective of his other good friend, who's a girl, and it's a high school football jock's girlfriend. Now the next one, I'll give a little secret here, is No Chance actually can communicate with, he sees and talks to ghosts. And I did it before they did it on the movies. So that's how old this book is. And the reason he can do that is when they were in utero, he was a twin. And the twin, I found out that if you have twins, and both of them don't have to have Down syndrome, one may and one may not. And one of the twins that did not have Down syndrome passed away in utero. but he's still with Noah, and Noah sees him and talks to him, and he's growing as Noah grows. They're getting older together. And I think the next one is going to be told from his point of view.
Oh, wow.
So it's a ghost telling the story about his brother.
Right. Now, I have to ask you this, because I've heard it so many times from authors. Do your characters always fit what you want them to do, or do they take off on their own?
They take off on their own. Mine always do. The only book, The Bottle Tree, I knew from the moment I started writing what was going to happen at the end of it. And in between there, all kinds of things happened I didn't expect. And the Dragon's Whistle, I knew what was going to happen at the end, because since it's going to be an ongoing series and it's for middle grade to high school, I knew the boys had to come home. But everything in between there, they did it on their own. I wrote a blog post one time about I was trying to finish up Second Chance. Matter of fact, I was trying to finish it up so I could premiere it here at the Folk Festival that year. And for some reason, Spencer, Jennifer, and Noah wouldn't come visit. They weren't there. They were off on vacation somewhere. And I'd write the book, and it sounded like I was writing the book. It didn't sound like they were speaking, which is a big issue. And then, with about 3 weeks to go on a deadline I have to get it to the publisher to be able to get it back, all of a sudden they showed up one day, and I finished the book. So
they helped to write it, huh?
Yeah, that's the way it happens. Somebody comes and sits with me and helps me write the book, and I went back over and not remember writing a section.
Oh, wow. It just flowed out.
It just came out.
Now, is that on computer or handwritten? How do you do it?
I wrote The Bottle Tree by hand. All the rest of them I've typed. I've tried dictating, but I didn't like dictating when I had an office. It just doesn't sound right, doesn't feel right. So I use computer most of the time. But I do, if I'm stuck somewhere and I get an idea, I'll start writing on a piece of paper, then switch it to the computer when I get home. So I've got tons of scraps of paper with pieces of books on them laying around.
I can imagine the way, I mean, you've got so many books right here on so many different topics. I can imagine that you've got so much rattling around in there. And you have to decide which one's going to be at the forefront.
That's it, which one's next.
Yeah.
I've probably got 12 books started on my computer. And it's just an idea popped into my head, and I wanted to go ahead and cover it. So I would knock out as much as I could that day, and then just sit it aside while I finish something else. And one of these days I'll pick it back up and finish it.
Yeah, because you'll have it all right there. You'll be back in the moment when you get to it.
Doc Holliday I started last year, I think it was, and when I finished The Dragon's Whistle, I picked it up again to start working on it, and I had 20,000 words written on it, and it's going to end up being about 75,000.
Wow.
And so I have a substantial portion there. And I think I've got 30-something thousand written on it now. And then The Dragon's Whistle, I had 12,000 written on it 3 months ago, and it's about 50,000 more. It was going to be 35 to 40,000 words. It ended up being between 50 and 60,000.
It grew.
It wouldn't stop.
Yeah.
So,
it was telling the story.
Exactly.
Now, since this session is about family and folk history, I have to ask you where you got that idea for Doc Holliday being a vampire. Nothing in your family, I hope.
No. Other than reading a lot of westerns. Actually, what gave me that idea was I was watching the movie Tombstone one day when it first came out, and Val Kilmer did a great job playing him in that movie. But when I first saw the picture of Val Kilmer, before I'd seen the movie, I saw the picture of him there. I said, he looks more like a vampire than he does a gunfighter, because he was pale and wasted away. And Doc Holliday had tuberculosis, which was causing a great deal of health problems. Then I found out his mother had died of it. And there are some things that you can work with, and with very few changes to his history, make him into a vampire. There's a guy that he absolutely hated called Dirty Dave Rudabaugh that rode with Billy the Kid for a while. He was actually in Tombstone at the time they had the OK Corral fight, he ended up going to Mexico and getting his head cut off. He was a really mean guy.
Okay.
And in the old world, I think it's Romania specifically, that's one of the things they did with vampires. They would cut their head off and then turn around backwards in the coffin with them. And so I saw the picture of Dirty Dave Rudaball's head there, and it just kind of, everything fell into place. I know that Doc Holliday hated him in real life. So.
Ooh, that fits in nicely.
Yeah, it did.
All the blood and guts and gore, huh?
Absolutely.
Yay. Now, you mentioned this one, and I held it up.
Oh, okay.
June bug in the body, and I want you to talk a little bit about this one. What was the inspiration here?
That one, it says it's based in a county in East Texas called St. John County. That's where I put it as being based. It's actually about Natchitoches.
Okay.
These two boys go fishing out of the creek, and they're going to try noodling, which is when you reach up under the rocks and grab catfish. I've never done it because I know there's lots of stuff up under rocks.
Yes.
So, but they're arguing over who's going to do it, and they finally reach down and they're trying to grab something, and instead a dead body floats up. And the boys, one of them's kind of wild, and the other one's the son of, or the grandson of the local sheriff. And they don't believe that the sheriff's office is moving quite fast enough. It's sheriff's office, 2 people in that town. And so they take on their own investigation. And it's, you would think it was a kid's book, but it's really not. It's a real humorous book for people that like nostalgic. It's set back in the early 70s, so you don't have to worry about all the CSI stuff. I did have to do a little bit of research to find the right drug that was available at that time that would fit in the plot. And
Don't give too much away.
And I had it almost finished. I couldn't think of what the ending was going to be, and I was on the way back to my house from here, from my mom's house here, and I was asleep on the in the passenger seat. All of a sudden I sat up and said, "I got it." And went home and finished it. The last 10,000 words. That was it.
Done.
But if you read through it, there was he talks about going to the library, which is the one over here that used to be over here on Cane River Lake, and then they would go get an ice cream cone afterwards. But that was the PNC drugstore. I don't know if anybody else knows. They used to have square ice cream scoops.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then he talks about running behind the stores in the parking lot. Well, he had been running behind Morgan and Lindsay that was there on Front Street. So everything in there, I do mention that they get lost at a place called Good Hope Bottom, which is out headed toward outside of Cypress, headed back into Coosatchee. And we used to squirrel hunt there, and a lot of people do, but I guess about 11 o'clock opening day every year, you hear somebody in there yelling, "Help! I'm lost!" And so they get lost in there. And that's how it came about.
Stories from your own life, yeah. Let's see. There's something else that I wanted to mention before we get down to Dragon's Whistle. This one.
That one was, I noticed that when you go online, it's really hard to find. I have a lot of people ask me about Louisiana books. They know I'm from here. And I point them to some things, but it's really hard to find a good collection. And so what I did in that one, I think I put the Bottle Tree in there. It's included in that book. But I've also got things in there about like Kate Chopin, things that are out of copyright.
Right, that are public.
That are public domain.
Public domain.
I put quite a few different of those in there, just so people can have one book sit in their house that's got a lot of different stories about Louisiana in it.
Oh, and when you say a lot, you mean a lot.
Right.
A lot of different stories.
Yeah, some of them are 2 or 3 pages long, some of them are much longer. But it's
some of them are haunted, some of them are, that kind of thing.
It's a good variety, and I think it really, we named it Louisiana Gumbo, because gumbo is a mixture of a lot of different things. So, and I think the Louisiana Writers Project, Federal Writers Project actually, back in the Depression, they had some of the greatest stories and books written then.
Right.
A lot of people don't know that it existed, but the government paid for people who could write to go in and gather stories. And thank God they did, because we have a ton of things now that we wouldn't have if they hadn't been out there.
Right.
You know, sitting down on the porch, drinking a cup of coffee, 20
Uh-huh.
miles off the main road with some old timer taking down his thoughts. It's really interesting.
And that's really making something out of nothing,
It is.
because it was just to give people jobs, just so they could have some money to live on during the Depression.
Exactly. It's the same as the CCC camp I write about in this year's program. Is it was something that did good for everybody. And we get a big kick when we go out to Kisatchie and drive around the forest there, because we know we're driving on roads that my grandfather, his father, built or helped build. And my great grandmother, when she would do clothes and wash laundry for the guys at the CCC camp. So my great grandfather would walk down to the CCC camp, which was, if y'all know anything about Kisatchie, it was underneath what is now the work center out there. He would walk down there, gather clothes, walk back home. She'd wash them and hang them out to dry and iron them and all. And he'd walk back down a couple days and take them back to those guys. And I don't know if that's how my grandfather met my grandmother or not, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And the Federal Riders Project, that was kind of took a sidetrack there, but a lot of good stories came out of the CCC camp. There's going to be a book on that one day. But it was a way for the government to help people that were really. I read a little story about somebody that he said, I went to work there. He said I was living high on the hog. Before I got in there, I was eating poke salad and dandelion greens 3 times a day.
If you had it 3 times a day.
And we got meat every couple of days there. So we had a good meal every meal, but we got meat every other day. And that was something else.
I'm telling you.
So
from something like that, we get Gumbo Yaya, we get slave narratives,
Exactly.
and we get CCC camps and all of those stories. Yeah.
That's exactly right. It's truly amazing what the government can do when it wants to.
Yeah, to help people, right. Now this one, you said everything else here that we've looked at so far has been a book for adults.
Right.
Pretty much. Now this one is different.
That
Tell
one,
me about how this got started.
we realized we didn't have a kids book, and we got asked a lot for anything for kids. And I said, well, we will make one. And so that's the same thing. We gathered old Louisiana stories that were in public domain. We put together a little book for kids. And this one's more for the family to share, mom and dad and kids to read and talk about what happened and how it happened. And maybe get kids interested a little bit in history.
Yeah, yeah. I see you have some Brer Rabbit stories in here, Joel Chandler Harris stories and
I
so
love
forth.
those.
Yeah, those are really interesting. And so this one is a children's book.
It is.
And before we run out of time, I have to put this one up. This is your middle school. You talked a little bit about this one. Tell me where you got the inspiration for this story and how it developed.
I have twin sons named Robert and Anthony. They're 25 now, but at the one of them he's got his degree in archaeology. He actually worked down here a little bit in archaeology, but then decided he got tired of walking through fields in hot sun, so he's doing a security guard for right now until he decides to do something else in archaeology. And the other one, his brother works with him at the same place. And when he was little, Robert was insistent that there were dragons. And I couldn't talk him out of it. And he said, well, have you ever seen one? I said, no. He said, well, could be. Have you ever seen a great white shark? I said, well, on TV. He said, you haven't seen one in person, so same thing. Okay. Well, I started looking at some of the books they were reading, and they'd have stuff like Captain Underpants, or they had books that I can't, kids passing gas in school, and, all kinds of stuff. And they said, why don't you write a book about dragons, Dad? I said, okay, I will. And I started it, and it got shoved to the side while I worked on other stuff. And I finally decided 6 months ago I was going to finish it. And I did. And this one, there's 2 boys, Robert and Anthony, same as my twins. They go to a library, and the new librarian there gives them each a book that's bound in dragon hide. But he doesn't tell them that, but they know, at the end they know it's what it is. And they can see it's got lettering in it, but it's handwritten calligraphy, the way scribes used to do it. And there's a little conversation about how they used to have scribes make copies of books rather than printing presses. And they're cleaning the bathroom one day if they start reading the book, and an accident, the toilet pulls both of them in. It pulls Robert in, and then Anthony grabs his ankles and it pulls him in, and it shoots them out in another place and time, and they land in a great big pile of dragon poo. And then it's about what they have to do there. There's a dragon there. There's a bigger monster approaching. The dragons there are good, and the people don't know it, and the dragons don't like the people very much because they keep trying to throw things at them. And so there's a monster there they've got to kill, and there's this really old rhyme they have to solve, a riddle they have to solve.
Wow.
And the boys help them do that. The riddle's in there, and you can see it unfolding as it goes. And they end up helping a dragon learn how to whistle, and the whistle's part of the defense.
So it's not Captain Underpants, and it's not Passing Gas. It does have toilet in the title.
It does. It's going to be a series of books where the magic toilet takes them different places.
Yeah. So that would be attractive to children of that age.
Yeah.
Right.
It actually was originally called The Magic Toilet and something in the book title, but it wouldn't fit on the way we were trying to print it. So we changed the name, made it the Magic Toilet series. But it really does open it up, because in there they're actually in old France, or a country just like old France. And as usual, I did some research on France, and there's a town there called Natchitoches. It's a big castle, and the one thing I thought was, if you go down to the grocery store here, they've got cream cheese and light cream cheese. The light cream cheese is Natchitoches cheese.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but the original one, the one that the town in France sells, is shaped like hearts, and it's always been. And the dragon in the book is in love with a female dragon who has disappeared, and he wants to get her some of the heart-shaped cheeses for her. She likes it. So it's just a little tidbit, but that part's based on a little bit of research.
A fact.
Yeah.
I wanted this to be very kind of light and open to the audience, but we're running out of time, so I want to make sure you have a chance to ask questions. If you have any questions, anything you need to ask, anything you want to say? Okay.
Yeah.
Then
Sir.
Do you have a website that I can order the books off of?
I do. Sure do. And if you order from the website, you can order from website or Amazon. If you order from the website, they'll come autographed, sent to your house. Amazon doesn't ask me to autograph, they just ship them out. So.
Oh, and he has a stack of them here also.
Yeah.
So you can buy them here.
We have
also.
a booth. If you get a chance, go by there. My wife made a dragon book. It's kind of like the one in the book. It's sitting there in a glass case. It's really cool. She did a lot of work on it.
Yeah, it really is cool.
Yeah.
And I also want to mention that by happenstance, if you pick up one of these at the festival, which is the festival program, there's also a short story in here by Mr. Bennett all about the CCC camps.
Right.
So it was just a quick...
Yeah, Shane called or sent me an email. Shane Rasmussen, the director, sent me an email, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, and said, I've got a page I need to fill. Do you have a short story you want to put in there, or an article or a piece of your book or anything? I said, well, I wanted to do a little something on the CCC camps. I said, and it really does fit in well with the history and folklore of our area, so how about that? He said, great. So I sent it to him later that day, I think it was. I knocked it out pretty quick.
Free story. You get a free story in here.
And it's all accurate. It's about the camp that was out here. It's about the CCC camp's history in general, how they got started and such, what they did, and then it's specifically about the one that was out at Kisatchie, because that one had a huge effect, and it's still having an effect. If you go out there, if anybody's ever hiked the Longleaf Vista Trail out there, it's a beautiful trail. Well, they built it. That's how it got started.
That's the CCC camp, right.
Almost every road out there you go down they built at least part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've spent a lot of time out there, and
It's where people can touch history.
Sure.
They actually can touch history by walking on those roads.
you absolutely can. It's amazing. Used to be that we didn't ever see any turkeys out there. In the last 2 or 3 times we've been out there, we've had wild turkeys run across the road in front of us. They've done a great job building the turkey population back up, the people at the Forest Service.
Mm-hmm.
And the forest sits on both sides of the road. Yes, ma'am.
But I have a question.
Uh-huh.
You said in order to write, you should read a lot, all right? So if you had the opportunity to meet a famous author, either dead already or alive, who would you like to meet?
Okay, let me repeat that one really quickly. If you had a chance to meet an author, dead or alive, who would you like to meet?
It would be either Mark Twain, Jack London, or Stephen King. I think Stephen King is the modern equivalent of, he's the great master. If you, a lot of people say I don't like his books because they're scary. If you avoid the scary parts, he is phenomenal at writing about normal people. Just everyday guys, people you meet at the grocery store, at the mechanic shop, at the service station. There's nobody better at that. Jack London, for his are a little dated now, but they're still great tales of adventure of the world. And Mark Twain was just phenomenal at everything he did. Huckleberry Finn is my favorite book's Tom Sawyer. I like it better than Huckleberry Finn. Although I know usually Huckleberry Finn's the one taught in school.
Right.
But those two are two of my favorite books ever. I absolutely love them.
Oh, I'm glad that came up because I didn't even think to ask your favorite book.
Oh.
But I do have a question.
Sure.
Are you still practicing law or did
No.
you? Okay.
I studied
Writing
this.
full time?
I do some consulting on trials and stuff. I found out I was making more money actually working for lawyers, helping them with parts of their case.
Right.
And I got to go to England on a case, and so
Which gives you more time to do this.
That's right.
And it makes it fabulous.
less stress.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Except when your characters decide to go on vacation.
That's right.
And then, yeah.
And I
when
got a deadline.
When you're trying to meet a deadline, yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I think we're about out of time. I want to thank you for being here. This has been so interesting.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
doing
All
this.
right. Thanks, everybody.